A good friend of mine, Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel, has been convicted by an Israeli court of corruption. I don't. We haven't seen too much about that in the news, but it was. I'm sure it's made a lot of headlines in Israel. And the Israeli courts are tough on their elected officials. They want them to toe the line, and I think that's a good thing for Israel. But switching to the UN, once again, the United Nations is warning about global warming. The sky is definitely falling, and it's going to be flooding, more flooding, disaster, high food prices, and the end of the world. But many scientists say the fears about climate change are exaggerated.
Some experts say the concerns have been overblown for years, and one even says the new report is too alarmist. Heather Sells has the story.
More than 300 authors produced the 32-volume report. It warns of dire consequences if the world fails to act.
The message is very, very stark. Unless we cut our greenhouse gas emissions very rapidly, we will be inflicting disaster on ourselves and generations to come.
The report spells out that there are going to be potentially huge and catastrophic impacts, and that's why it says we need to reduce emissions in the long term.
A group of prestigious scientists created the report, but not everyone in the scientific community agrees with its findings. In fact, one of the authors of the report finds its conclusions too alarmist.
What the report, for instance, forgets to say is that even though climate change may reduce crop yields by 2% per decade, at the same time crop yields are going up by 10, 15, 20% per decade due to technological change. So it's not the case that climate change will cause widespread famine. Instead, climate change will mean that crop yields will go up more slowly.
A non-governmental group of scientists backed by the libertarian think tank the Heartland Institute is also pushing back. It maintains that higher carbon dioxide concentrations and rising temperatures are causing, quote, no harm to the global environment or to human health. For years, some scientists have warned that climate change advocates have a radical agenda, even comparing them to religious cults. Others simply note that power, prestige, and money are all part of the debate.
There is, of course, a totally different agenda for the people who are pushing global warming. That's all about money. It's about making hundreds of billions of dollars for certain individuals who are pushing the whole thing.
I'm not convinced that there are that many scientists who view this as this apocalyptic end of the world issue, but that gets a lot of coverage. If I tell you the world's going to come to an end, I'll get on TV. If I tell you that it's not, I probably won't.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Well, as we've said, the climate on Mars has gone up. It's warmer in Mars, but they don't have any SUVs in Mars. They don't have any power plants, no coal-burning furnaces. But the sun seems to have a great role to play, and it probably will if it gets warmer here in the United States. But last time I heard, this has been one of the coldest winters on record. Well, while both sides debate global warming, there's no doubt about the threat of a deadly earthquake in Los Angeles. John Jessup has that story from Washington.
Pat, Friday night's earthquake in Los Angeles is raising concerns about just how bad a possible earthquake in the city itself could be. The quake came from a fault line that runs the city through a heavily populated area. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that a 7.5 magnitude quake there could kill 3,000 to 18,000 people and cause up to $250 billion in damages. In addition to hitting homes and businesses, earthquakes can also destroy natural and cultural landmarks. So can you guard against an earthquake and protect important historical artifacts at the same time? Experts in Jerusalem met recently to look for answers to that question. Here's Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem's Tower of David.
The walled city of Jerusalem is instantly recognizable, and one symbol stands above the rest.
The Tower of David is the symbol of it's the gateway actually to the old city and also to the new one.
Museum director Eilat Lieber gave us a rare look at the panoramic view of Jerusalem from the Tower of David. Its history and value are unquestioned, and many wonder, could it and other Jerusalem relics withstand an earthquake? Nature forced Italy to answer that question twice in 2009 and 2012. Major earthquakes killed hundreds and destroyed numerous buildings, including historical sites.
Our job is to help people, of course, and to prop up and ensure buildings damaged by earthquakes.
Luca Ponticelli shared his earthquake experience and what he learned at this recent seminar.
I was one of the experts that implemented our technical procedures to shore or to prop up the buildings. So my mission here is to explain our job.
It's all part of an international project to protect historical sites from earthquakes. The Tower of David here in the center of Jerusalem is the first heritage site to be chosen in Israel for this international project. It's been installed with a special monitoring system from the top all the way down to the bottom. This system monitors cracks in the tower and the region's seismic activity. The last major earthquake to hit Jerusalem was in 1927. Israel straddles the Jordan Rift Valley, and experts predict it's time for another.
We had earthquake, we will have earthquakes.
Dr. Avi Shapira heads up the effort to prepare Israel for such a disaster.
What we are urging our engineering community and all the national authorities is really to check the capacity of this structure to withstand earthquake and do something if possible, and it is possible.
The goal for Shapira and others is to preserve Jerusalem's treasures like the Tower of David.
Everybody's talking about the big earthquake that's coming, and we must be part of the academic research.
You know, we live in the Holy Land, and not only the Holy Land, but Promised Land. And we have also to promise our children and grandchildren that something will remain for them to see.
Chris Mitchell, the Tower of David, Jerusalem.
Pat, and experts are especially worried about the old city because it's built not on solid rock, but on layers of debris.
Well, so are many of the cities in Japan. They're built on a fill going out into the ocean, and when a big earthquake comes, that'll just liquefy and it'll just wash things out. I was in Jerusalem when an earthquake struck. I felt a bump in the bed behind me, and I wondered who was hitting the wall behind me, and it wasn't any, and the curtain on it was swaying back and forth. It was down in the Rift Valley, and there's a major fault that goes from Africa all the way up through that area. And the Bible tells us the time is going to come that there's going to be a major earthquake, and the Mount of Olives is going to shift, and there's going to be a highway going from there straight back into the desert area. So it'll happen, and I'm sure some of those structures will stand and some of them won't. But being in an earthquake is an awful feeling, and I'm sure the people in California have experienced so many of them. I don't think you ever get used to the fact the ground underneath you is shaking.
I had it happen once when I was in California, and it is a very strange sensation to feel things around you moving, and it takes a minute to register what it is, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, my son Tim was in Northridge when that thing hit, and you know, stuff was falling off the wall. He didn't quite know what to do. He was very.
You don't know what to do. You're sort of stopped in your tracks.
But, they keep talking about the big one in L.A. I mean, they say it's overdue, and this new fault they have discovered, isn't discovered, but they've begun to emphasize, goes from Orange County to Hollywood, as opposed to the San Andreas, which everybody has looked at for so long. You can see it moving. It goes all the way up through California. But there's the Haywood Fault. There are many other faults out there, and when those rocks start to move, it doesn't take much. And they hold, they get tight, they get stuck, and then all of a sudden they break. And it's just that break that it doesn't take more than a few feet.
Yeah, and it happens usually pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't last too long.
It's over. But anyhow, people are focusing on that, and we'll see what happens. But you look at the Bible, and Jesus said there were going to be earthquakes, and an intensification of earthquakes and of famines and of pestilence before the end of days. So it's on the way. John?
Pat, the United States may release an Israeli prisoner as part of a deal to extend the Middle East peace talks. Jonathan Pollard was convicted of spying on the U.S. on behalf of Israel in 1987. He's already served more than 25 years of his life sentence. Now the U.S. may set him free to get Israel to release 400 Palestinian prisoners and resume negotiations. Israel is concerned that yet another release of dangerous prisoners will not be met by any sincere moves from the Palestinians. And Pat, one Israeli cabinet minister says Pollard opposes being freed in exchange for murderers, calling it a shameful deal.
Well, I would call it a shameful deal. I think it's a shameful thing what we did to Pollard. Pollard was working for a friendly company, and he released a few documents. And somehow, if I'm hearing it right, Cap Weinberger attributed the spying of Aldrich Ames to Jonathan Pollard and thought he was responsible for the bloodletting that took place in the CIA. And therefore, they put him in isolation. They treated him shamefully, trying to break him. It was horrible, the treatment that man was given. He should have been released a long time ago, but certainly not in exchange for 200 or 300 bloodthirsty terrorists from the Palestinians. But I've been calling for the release of Jonathan Pollard for years, and what we did to him is just flat out wrong. John?
Pat, in Asia, rising tensions between North and South Korea. The countries fired hundreds of artillery shells into each other's waters following an announcement from Pyongyang that it would conduct live fire drills in the Yellow Sea. Caitlin Burke reports.
It's only a mild sign of aggression. About 100 North Korean shells reportedly crossed over the Yellow Sea border, landing in South Korean waters. Seoul responded by firing about 300 shells toward the North Sea territory. Pyongyang has recently stepped up its threats against South Korea, protesting its joint military exercises with the U.S. North Korean officials call the war exercises an attempt to occupy Pyongyang. The allies say they're routine and defensive.
This exercise was not designed to react to any political situation. It's not designed to send a message. This is something that we have to do to be able to interoperate with our allies.
On Sunday, Pyongyang threatened to conduct a fourth nuclear test aimed at improving its ability to attack mid- and long-range targets. The White House says North Korea's threats will only deepen its isolation. Meanwhile, the country's sole ally in the region, China, is calling for both North and South Korea to show restraint.
We hope all sides involved can remain calm and restrained, refrain from taking actions that will heighten the tension, and work together to preserve the Korean Peninsula's peace and stability.
Beijing traditionally sides with the United Nations in condemning provocative actions from the North, but they've fallen short of signaling out North Korea, saying instead that both sides are responsible. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Turning to the crisis in Ukraine, America's Secretary of Defense is downplaying recent reports that Russian troops are pulling away from the Ukraine border. Russian news agencies have claimed that a battalion of 500 troops are backing down.
I cannot confirm, Bob, one way or the other, whether the Russians are pulling troops back from the Ukrainian-Russian border. As you know, President Obama made it very clear to President Putin in their conversation that is going to be required, necessary, in order for us to have any further meaningful conversation about how we resolve and de-escalate this crisis. That said, there's still a tremendous buildup of Russian forces on that border.
Meanwhile, Russia has hiked the price on natural gas supplies sent to Ukraine. That move puts yet another squeeze on the struggling country and its cash-strapped government. Pat?
I don't think war is a good thing, and I've just been reading a book by former Secretary of Defense Gates, who talked about the consequences of war, and as I recall, he said that the doves are garbed in military uniforms because the service people see how horrible war is. So we don't want to go to war, but what we do and can do is just exactly what Putin's doing. We can make available our natural gas. We can take the lid off the production of natural gas and oil in America and allow that material to be exported. We can also set up LNG loading facilities so that we can take liquefied natural gas and ship it overseas. And we could tell the Europeans, we have sources of gas we're going to make available to you at reasonable prices. You will not be held captive by the Russians. The next thing we can do, and we've got to do it, I mentioned it yesterday, I say it again, there are ways to destabilize an enemy's economy. In today's cyber terror, we are masters at it, and there's a weapon we're not even talking about, and of course we shouldn't talk about it. You should do it secretly, and you just hit them. And all of a sudden, those oligarchs find that their bank accounts have been drained, and they don't have any money. They don't know, where did the money go? Well, it was in a computer, it's not there anymore. They'll find that their trade balance doesn't work because none of the computers function. You can stop them dead in their tracks. We have the facility to do that. We don't have to have a lot of rhetoric. But I think you've got guys like Hagel, who's a bit of a dove. You've got Secretary of State, who's a noted dove. And you've got a president who is extremely hesitant to act, and all of them together are being played for suckers by Putin, who is a very dynamic KGB operative. And he's going to take everything he can unless we're willing to act. And we've got to do it. We have the tools, and we don't have to send our troops to war. We could just bomb out the Russian economy in a matter of weeks. We could leave it, you know, gasping on the side of the road. They are a third world country. They aren't all that sophisticated, but we certainly don't need to tell them that. We don't get on the air and say, well, they're a second-rate power. You don't say that, Mr. President. You say, well, they're a great nation. And we hope to live in peace forever with our dear friends in Russia. And then underneath, you have cut their legs off.
Air Force cadets can say, so help me God. That's the message religious freedom advocates are sending to the cadets via billboard. The Chaplain Alliance for Religious Freedom and the Restore Military Religious Freedom Coalition put the billboard note not far from an academy entrance. Last fall, cadets received new handbooks that had removed the phrase, so help me God, from the cadet oath of office. After members of Congress intervened, the academy said the omission was a printing error and that cadets have the option to say the words. Gay marriage is now legal in parts of the United Kingdom. This weekend marked the change in England and Wales. Scotland plans to allow gay marriages come October, but Northern Ireland has no plans to do the same. And although the new law recognizes same-sex marriage, many religious groups do not. Officials from the Church of England are forbidden from taking part in gay weddings, and the measure allows for other religious organizations to refuse to perform them. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, cbnnews.com.